Hi guys, welcome to another video of Showtime Rajesh. So Apple recently announced in their WWDC event, Apple announced two new laptops. So basically one is an entire new lineup, same model name but an entire new lineup, and the other one is exactly the same computer as the last year, just with a newer chip. So because the MacBook Air, the new M2 MacBook Air is not yet available, so we'll be starting with the M2 MacBook Pro. This is the 13-inch MacBook Pro. So before going any further, I'll clarify you the Pro laptop range that Apple is offering right now. So they have three models. So for the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the touch bar is still there, the older design and everything is still there, the curved bottom and all those things is still available. On the 14-inch Pro and the 16-inch Pro models, the MacBook Pro model, those are different computers with different chip. This one basically is just an M2 Air machine with a little better thermals. So now we'll be talking about the M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch with the older design. Everything same. Literally, if I keep both the computers next to each other, I don't think anyone in this world will be able to distinguish between the two. It's that same. So let's start with the differences first. As I have mentioned, there are not a lot of differences. And in the end of the video, I'll try to give you my initial impressions of the product, for which audience Apple is targeting this niche product and where actually Apple is heading with the, the Pro lineup of laptops that they are offering. So first of all, the major change that you are going to notice is the M2 chip inside the MacBook Pro. M2 Apple claims is 20% faster in CPU usage as compared to the older generation models. I think M1 was 3.2 gigahertz. This is 3.49 gigahertz model, the M2 chip. So definitely it will be around 20% faster. The GPU, it has two more cores. RAM and the bandwidth has increased for the M2. So M1 is already a very powerful chip. I remember using the M1 MacBook Air, and trust me, that thing can edit 4K videos on a fanless design. I can't say it did for a prolonged period of time, but it edited the whole video in, like, you won't feel that it's an underpowered laptop. And when you are, I'll give you a small example. Let's say when you are rendering a video in DaVinci Resolve, so the number of frames that's being rendered every second on the M1 MacBook Pro was around 48 to 50 frames per second. On the M2 MacBook Pro, the newer one, it's somewhere around 55 to 58 frames per second. It's not that different. It will definitely show when you are using something that will require more CPU performance or more GPU cores. In that it might show, but there is, according to me and in my usage, there is not that huge difference. In the long run, 3 years, 4 years down the line, you will definitely see performance gap as applications become more demanding and taxing on the system. So right now M2 is, I don't think, a revolution. It's an evolution. M1 was definitely a revolution. It changed the laptop industry forever. At least I don't think Apple had this much power and performance advantage compared to other Windows PC and Windows laptops. My M1 Max MacBook Pro can still beat a 3080 graphics card in video editing just based on optimization. It doesn't have the raw power. It doesn't have the power requirements as that of a 3080, but it can still easily beat that graphics card. One more very fun thing we observed between the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro and the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro is that same thing, same data that I told you about editing on Resolve. We got somewhere around 55 to 58 on the M2 MacBook Pro, and same, it was very close, like 60, 62, 64 frames per second rendering on M1 MacBook Pro, the 14-inch I'm talking. M1 Max is in a different league, and M1 Ultra, I don't think there's any point in comparing those, but they, just for context, I'm saying that they offer somewhere around 110 to 130, 40 frames per second rendering speed. So that's in a different ball game. But for these computers, M2 has kind of bridged the gap, at least in video editing in Resolve, between the the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch model compared to the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro. Second major difference that you'll find is in RAM. So now you can customize the M2 to 24 GB of RAM. In the earlier model, I think you can only do till 16 gigs of RAM, and in this you can do till 24. Not a huge difference, but when you are doing video editing extensively, 4K heavier files, so you will need the RAM speed. That way I think it can compensate for it. Next thing is battery life. Battery life on M1 machines were fabulous, and same thing continues here. It's tad bit better than M1, which shows that it's more efficient, the M2 chips. It's not that different, but it will take lots of tasks for you to kill the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the M2 model. It's that efficient, it's that good in battery life. I wish Apple could offer that in the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro and the 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. As you can see on the chart, the details displayed, we tested the machine on heavy load and under lighter load, and you can clearly see the difference between them. Now coming to the cons of the machine, because I think M1 MacBook Air and M1 MacBook Pro was a game changer. Both of those machines changed the laptop industry forever. Surprisingly, M2 MacBook Pro couldn't do that because of one single reason, that the 14-inch MacBook Pro exists in the market. Lots of things that you are missing despite getting the Pro name, although the price difference is there slightly. The 14-inch MacBook Pro starts somewhere around 1,94,000-95,000 rupees, and on the other hand, the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro starts at 1,30,000 rupees. Although one small thing that we have noticed, and it's widely being covered also, is the difference between SSD speeds. So I have no idea why, but the 13-inch MacBook Pro has way slower SSD compared to the older M1 13-inch MacBook Pro, the new one, the M2 MacBook I'm talking about, has very slow, like 20 to 30% difference in SSD speeds compared to the older ones. So Apple, despite having a very clean and very broad lineup, is still keeping the 13-inch MacBook Pro just to bring those users into the ecosystem who want a pro experience, but they don't have the money to pay like 1,95,000 rupees, or for the higher 16-inch model 2,30,000 rupees. So basically this laptop is targeted at that, where you are getting the best performance in the market right now in any laptop compared in that price range, in that form factor. It's the best laptop out there right now. But still, few, maybe you can say that I have extensively used the 14 and 16-inch laptops, so maybe because of that I'm complaining about these things, but I think Apple should put these things at least in their Pro machine. One of which is 120 Hz refresh rate. There is no going back. Mac OS, despite being very smooth and very, very good on UI experience, UI UX experience, but I still miss the 120 Hz refresh rate on the 13-inch MacBook Pro. That's, I think, the biggest drawback of that machine. And I don't know why people will still go for the M2 MacBook Pro despite having the M2 MacBook Air line, which is completely redesigned laptop, available in lots of great colors, very slim design, and I mean, it's a better laptop. Just one thing, it has a little terrible, thermals as compared to the M2 model. That's the only difference, at least in what seems like right now. Once we get to the testing and we test all the models, then I think we'll be able to back it up with more data-driven research from our side. So let's summarize this video. Apple announced a very good machine. It's probably the best machine in the market in that price range and that design. But just because the 14-inch MacBook Pro exists in the market, it kind of dials down the whole experience of the 13-inch MacBook Pro. So it's a very niche product for people who are looking to get into Apple ecosystem, who know that they are going to do very sustained heavy load work on their laptop. For them, the M2 MacBook Pro makes sense and they should definitely check this out. And I don't think there is any other laptop in the market in this price segment that offers this much performance. So make an informed decision, go out, check the laptop once, check the usability, and check MacBook Air also. I think you should wait till the MacBook Air is available, the M2 MacBook Air. Check both the laptops, see our review for the M2 MacBook Air, which will be dropping, I think, probably the next or next to next day of the product being available in India. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.